and welcome to part 2 of our Scream and Screamogran extravaganza.
I thought Tron was part 2 of your Scream and Screamogran extravaganza.
Well, the entire month on the website is all dedicated to things I continuously link to the word Scream.
Well played. I'm Nicholas. I do research in astrophysics.
Dennis P. Love movies, specifically the horror genre.
Well, slasher genre to be specific.
Slasher, to be more precise, correct.
And I'm Dimitri,
Editor-in-Chief of Idiomanic and film critic.
who apparently recently reviewed Tron. We're going to review Scream 2 without spoilers, and then we're going to have a section where we say spoiler, and then we're going to make fun of Dennis. So that's how it's going to go.
I agree.
We pick up after the events of the Woodsboro murders, where they have adapted the thing into a movie called Stab. It gets all the crazy people riled up who start calling Sydney to harass her because they think killing is cool.
Yeah.
And Sydney is actually in college now. She's in film studies. And the killings are starting again because somebody's trying to make their own sequel.
Yeah, and it was a good sequel. I enjoyed it. It had a good story. The story was about as good as the first one. Again, there were twists you didn't see happening. Characters were good. I enjoyed them a lot.
And I have to add, and this is one of my favorite points of Scream 2, is that they said in the movie, a sequel by definition sucks. And there's very few sequels, and they talk about it in the film class, are just as good or better than the original. Maybe in their film class they were a little bit too broad, but I would think in the horror genre, I think it's more true that usually the sequels suck compared to the original. If you compare Psycho with Psycho 2, let's say, or...
Yeah, although Psycho 2 I kind of like, but obviously it's a step down from Psycho. But...
It's a step down from Hitchcock or, I don't know, Halloween 2.
Oh, yeah.
You could take any of them, Friday the 13th Part 2. I mean, usually the sequel by definition, at least for a horror movie, sucks. And you know what? I think Scream 2 played to that rule, it kind of knew that it wasn't going to be as good as the first one.
Do you think they really made the story weaker because it was a sequel, or they just couldn't come up with something? I think that the story was still pretty good. I don't see it as weaker than the first one, really.
Yeah?
No, I liked it a lot. Actually, story-wise, I'd say it's on par with the first one.
No, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Scream 2 is in itself very ingenious. But what I mean that it sucked compared to the first one is that it did it on purpose. It's a joke, it knows that it's a sequel, and it's acting like a sequel.
And of course, you have the rules of the sequel. What were they again?
The rules of the sequel is that the body count is always bigger, the death scenes are more elaborate, and there's more blood and gore, usually. Mm-hmm. Don't assume under any circumstance that the killer is dead, And, that's the thing. The rules, I think they were followed in this one. There's a little bit of a body count, but not too much more than the original.
That was good. The suspense of it was good. The interaction with the characters, it didn't feel fake. It was like, hey, they didn't change the characters as well. These characters were the same as in the first one. There was a little slowdown towards the middle there. After an hour, there was maybe 20, 25 minutes where the action really slowed down a lot. But besides that, it was a very good story.
Yeah, the slowdown happens when they reenact the romance between Dewey and Gale Weathers. At the end of the first movie, you get the feeling that Dewey and Gale Weathers are going to be together. And they then, at the start of the second movie, they sort of split them up again so that they can be together again and sort of redo that courtship. And that's exactly when the slowdown occurs where you're like, I care less about this. But I suspect it's because we've seen it before.
Yes, you've seen it already. So, all right, are they going to end up together again? I mean, who really cares, really? The story's about Sydney anyway. They're supporting characters, so at that point in the movie kind of grinds to a halt, and then, it picks up back again, and it's fine.
Yeah, I agree. The story is much more about Sydney. Well, I think that's actually the strong point of Scream 2, is the character work is actually slightly stronger than the first Scream, because the first Scream, they're very focused on the joke.
Yeah.
And they're all crazy, and they're all sick in the head.
Yes.
And they're all a little bit detestable. Whereas Scream 2, they're a little bit warmer, especially, of course, the survivors of the first movie, which, spoiler alert, is Sydney, played by...
Neve Campbell.
Yes, Neve Campbell, thank you. Gale Weathers, played by Courtney Cox. Dewey, played by Dave Arquette, and Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy. So
Yeah.
that's 4.
4 survivors.
And they're really warm. Like I love the scene where Dave Arquette actually comes back, and they all sort of gather around him like their new big brother, and sort of this really warm relationship between them. And he's super protective of them too. It's cute.
Yeah. And the other characters they introduced as well. Very good. Like Sydney's new boyfriend.
Oh, you like Jerry O'Connell
Yeah.
as Sydney's boyfriend?
Yeah, he was good.
I thought he was a little bit generic for me because Jerry O'Connell, he's a good actor. He's on TV now, Crossing Jordan, and
Sliders.
yes, it's certainly grown up very well from being the fat kid in Stand By Me.
That was him?
That was him.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can call him fat as a kid because he's now grown up to be way better looking than I am, so I don't have to feel bad about it. He's had the last joke on all of us. But there's a scene where he romances Sydney, and he references freaking Top Gun of all movies. It's so weird.
Yeah, I didn't quite like that scene. That scene was just, it seemed off to me, really.
They want to remind us that these guys only process information through movies, once again, like in the first movie. And so they want to make a reference that even when they do courtship, it's all movie-based. But it was like, Top Gun? Really? Top Gun?
Yeah, they could have chosen better. Maybe something in the horror genre, too, Although there's not a lot of love there, but, surprised by the number of cameos, of very good actors that were in the movie.
Yeah, it's a who's who of actors who are actually, known today.
Yeah, like Joshua Jackson. Like, it has, 2 lines, I think, at most, in the class.
There's a reason why Kevin Williamson works a lot with Joshua Jackson, because he just has that rhythm down of, popping out pop culture references in this really casual way.
Yeah.
And you figure, hey, that guy's going to die or going to be the killer or something. Never shows up again.
Never at all.
And of course, Portia de Rossi from Better Off Ted and Ally McBeal, and who's the funniest thing in both of those shows, shows up in this teeny tiny role as this really shallow sorority girl who's best friends with Rebecca Gayheart.
Yeah, who looks 30.
But at least she's playing a sorority girl, not a teenager this time. Like
Yeah.
in Urban Legends, she looked the same, but she was playing a 15-year-old, and you're like, nah.
Nah.
But who gives a damn about Rebecca Gayheart? Like, seriously, where is she now?
Sarah Michelle Gellar as well plays like a sorority girl. You're like, really? That's the best role they could find you?
Yeah, and she's, I don't think we're spoiling anything, but she gets attacked by a Ghostface at some point, and contrary to her Buffy persona, or even like any woman in Scream, doesn't really put up much of a fight in
Not
a way that
really.
you would expect from Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Exactly.
One that I found incredibly funny was that in the first Scream, Sydney said with her luck, if in the movie Stab, if there was a movie about this, should be played by Tori Spelling. And funny enough, in this one, Tori Spelling does in fact play Sydney. So
In Stab, yeah.
in the movie of the movie, right?
I wonder if they warned Tori Spelling, you have to play a bad actress, or if they just, let's get Tori Spelling, she's a bad actress.
What they did is that they refilmed scenes from the first movie, but adding all the horror cliches that the first one was smart enough to avoid. And to some degree, yeah, it may be Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven may be patting themselves on the back a little bit too much by doing that. But the house where Drew Barrymore's character gets killed, well, suddenly she takes a shower for no reason.
Yeah.
But also the details was like, it's clearly a California house as opposed to a Woodsboro house where
Yeah.
she has a pool. And like, for those of you who watch horror films, like, if you notice, whenever they film in Hollywood, you can recognize it right away because all the houses, even if it's supposed to be a suburban house, has this big freaking pool in the middle of it.
Of course, it's California.
Yeah.
You need the pool.
Exactly. And of course, it's supposed to be taking place somewhere up north, in Woodsboro.
Yeah.
And so the idea of them having a warm pool makes no sense, but they added it and it's freaking hilarious. And they have an actual good actor playing bad. They have Luke Wilson deliberately playing Billy bad. Like, he actually out-Skeet Ulrich.
Yes.
That was hilarious. Hilarious. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, was it Robert Rodriguez, I think, that directed those shots?
Oh, did he?
Fake, of the fake stab.
Because he collaborated with Kevin Williamson before with The Faculty. So
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. I completely forgot about that, yeah.
But getting back to the idea that Sarah Michelle Gellar is not putting up a fight. The women in general are not as strong as they were in the first movie, because that was a big in-joke with the first movie. It's like, well, they criticize the horror genre for being full of bimbos, and not a single one of them are.
Yeah.
And this one, I think because they've established Sydney as a super strong woman, they didn't really feel the need to repeat the joke. So instead, they went with another type of casting joke where at the beginning of the movie, Jada Pinkett Smith, who also a big cameo, along with Foreman from House.
Omar, what's his face?
Omar Epps.
Omar Epps, yes.
Start talking about the fact that Black Americans are, thoroughly underrepresented in horror films. And the movie proceeds to cast half of the new characters are black.
Yeah.
And it's great, not least because one of them has the funniest joke that I think is supposed to play a little bit into those, and in the 90s was big, the comedians that goes like, white people do this, black people do that. And one of the most common one is that black people in a horror movie would get the hell out of the haunted house. Like, only white people stick around. And they play on that where at the middle of the movie, I won't say which character, but there's one character goes like, okay, you know what? That's enough killers. I'm getting the hell out of here. And he just freaking disappears.
Yeah. Comes back at the end when everything's solved. And I was like, all right, I'm back.
Which I thought was one of the best jokes in the movie.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that they continued the theme. They just didn't go like, okay, we're making fun of sequels now. They actually went with continuing the theme of the social satire that was established in the first movie. Those of you who haven't listened to the previous podcast, Scream was very much a product of its time because it was very much in reaction to horror movies getting criticized for, you're the reason why our kids are violent today, even though there are rated movies and your kids aren't supposed to watch it.
Yeah.
And the whole movie, especially when you get to the motivation of the killer, is all about really like our kids are so crazy and are so starved for attention from the media and from horror films that they're becoming killer. Because really your reaction to it, the way you're sort of dismissing a lot of what these movies are communicating, whether these movies should be even seen by your kids, you're dismissing a whole lot of that just to get media attention for your cause. And it's like, really, who's the biggest media horror there? There's fictional crazy kids or, Concerned Mothers of America and the Christian Coalition. Yes, I just called Mothers of America whores.
No, attention horse. That's completely different.
And it plays really nicely into that because you have Schreiber looking for his 15 minutes of fame. You have, once the killer's motivations are revealed, that gets played really up.
Yeah.
You have Gail Weathers, of course, screwing over her romance just to write her book. And
trying to get, on top again.
Yeah. I mean, and then again, they accentuate that point and they push it even further, like in the opening sequence when they're watching the movie Stab, and the audience are all wearing Ghostface, masks and knives, plastic knives, and they're all going crazy, waiting for that violent scene to occur.
Mild spoiler, there's a stabbing that goes on in the room and nobody notices because they're all still all maniac and they think it's part of the show and she's acting and they're all like cheering, yay!
What's great about it, in the audience, they have Jada Pinkett Smith. Pickett at the time. She wasn't Smith yet. Talking to her boyfriend, Omar Epps, and like being the typical, I don't want to be in this theater because it's a horror film, girlfriend.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't like this. This is stupid. And she's criticizing, pointing out all the cliches. And halfway into it, she starts getting into it and goes like, oh, don't go in the room. Don't go there.
Yeah.
It's sort of, I think, a representative of the charm of the horror film where it's like, yeah, we know it's dumb to a certain degree. Like, slasher movies are pretty dumb. It's always a serial killer killing a bunch of kids and then they find who it is. It's always the same freaking thing. But if it's well made, there's something kind of engrossing about it and it's irresistible. And I think that's what they were going for. Like, this is what the horror movie does to you as an audience member. Yeah,
if you kind of get to like a character, you don't want that character to die. So you're like, don't do that. That's stupid.
I thought it's such an ingenious scene. It's a great opening. Almost worthy of the opening of the first Scream.
Yeah.
And that's what I love the most about Scream 2 is that it sort of plays on the same beats, but does something completely different, almost at the same level.
Yeah.
There's still that level of social satire where people don't think they have a life unless there's a camera in front of them. Like to the point that we want to reinvent our own private narratives as a movie. And I think that's a real phenomenon in life where you meet it all the time. People who treat their love life like it's a Hollywood movie where it's like, I'm going to meet the one and all of that. It's like when after the montage where you put 27 dresses, like, come on, like get your feet on earth,
Yeah, it's very relevant. Yeah, it's still relevant. Concerning the fact that it was made over 10 years ago. It's I think it's even more relevant today where people are really obsessed with being in front of the camera with YouTube and everything, right?
And of course, you have Sydney, who's trying to run away from that. She just doesn't want that attention. And then they have her in a play. I'm not up on my Greek mythology. What was it again? Cassandra.
The Madness of Cassandra or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, Cassandra being a character who had the knowledge of both the future and the past, but it was also cursed that nobody would believe her.
Yeah.
Sydney, as the main character, sort of represents the horror movie in the eyes of Wes Craven, where he sort of feels that horror movies have an important message to communicate about society, about the sort of satire he's doing in Scream 2, for example. But nobody's really getting it because of all the media horror saying, like, the violence, the violence, violence. And like Cassandra, the horror movie has a message to communicate, and no one is ever going to listen to it, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a little bit of symbolism for you.
Yeah, I did not get that symbolism.
Yeah. Maybe you were distracted by Gus Van Sant as the biggest douche teacher in the world.
Yes.
He's the director of the play, and yeah.
Yeah, it's great that she has just, been attacked by Ghostface, and he has her rehearse a scene where a bunch of actors are trying to stab her. That was pretty funny.
And she's like, I don't know if I can do this. This is touching a sore point for me right now. It's like, I thought you were a fighter.
The biggest fighter in the world would still be freaked out at, people trying to stab them, even in the play, after having survived that.
Major douche.
Yes.
I like the campus setting, though, for the kills. It's closed off, which gives it a claustrophobic feel, but it's still big enough that it's not just like, why don't you get out of the house? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the campus also makes it, it's a normal progression. She was in high school, it all happened, now she's in campus. It's totally relatable to the audience as well, for people who went to college anyway. So, it's not something, it's some weird situation where now Sydney's in space and, what the hell's happening?
Yeah, Leprechaun 4 in space didn't do it for you?
Didn't do it at all.
You know what? It was a bit more surprising. I have to say that, spoiler alert, the fact that, one of the most lovable characters actually gets killed in a very surprising daylight scenario, right?
Yeah, well, it broke one of the cardinal rules of a slasher is that you put it at night, and they set up one of the major set pieces in the middle of the day. It just shows what craft Wes Craven can wield in terms of suspense, because again, it's not a scene motivated by violence, it's not a scene motivated by gore, it's entirely, suspense and montage and editing, it's all in that, and really kick-ass dialogue.
Honestly, I think for me, that was the scene for this movie. It was a complete shock, did not expect that at all, like you said, it's daytime, you're like, okay, the killer's taunting them, like, oh, you can't see me, you'll never find me. Ha ha ha,
Mm.
And then, they push him a little too far. And killer reacts, just gets rid of the guy,
Yeah.
No, really, it was really well done. And there was a lot of suspenseful moments. Like the scene where Sydney and her friend are stuck in the police car and the killer's unconscious.
Mm.
And they have to kind of sneak over him, like through the window.
Again, the policeman completely incompetent.
And there's this weird moment where, one of the cops get killed, and they focus on the guy trying to grab his gun, and then he gets killed, and he still has his hand on the gun, and it's like there's a 3-second shot of the gun.
Yeah.
And Sydney and her friend are trying to get away from the ghost face, and they're right next to the gun, and nobody picks it up, and the gun never plays into that scene.
That was weird. That was weird filmmaking. I don't know if it was intended that, the gun was like, hey, the policeman tried to use his gun, now he's down, so the gun can't be used. But it still focuses on the gun, and why aren't they picking it up? It just made it look really weird.
It really is, and it's one of those things that I never would have questioned it, never would have noticed. Like, I never would have gone, there's a dead cop, why didn't Sydney search him for a gun? Like, I never would have noticed if they didn't film that gun.
Yep.
Like, somewhere on the cutting room floor, there's a couple of cells where the gun does something.
It slips off the car or something.
So how would you rate Scream 2?
I'm going to give it an A.
An A?
Yeah. Good movie. I liked it. Besides the little slowdown there, I can gloss over the slowdown.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's a very enjoyable movie. I recommend it.
I'll give it an A-.
Because sequels, especially in the horror genre, really hard to pull off.
Yeah.
And here they continued the story, they moved the characters forward, they actually added some character beats that make them feel more human. And it also takes the message of the movie about the role of the media in horror films and in society.
So it does everything a sequel needs to do well, and it does a couple of things that a sequel needs to do badly as well, and that's actually a bonus, you know?
You know what, me too. I'd have to give it just a notch under the A+, because obviously for me, like, Scream is the one.
Mm-hmm.
You know what though, Scream 2, like you said, it's such a intelligent movie. You know, you gotta watch it at least a few times and just to get all the little nuances, the little jokes, the little, you know.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Like, you can't just see, like you said, as a straight up slasher sequel, you know, like, compared to the first one. You gotta see it as a movie that's aware of itself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Spoiler time!
All right, my favorite time.
Spoiler time.
You have to choose a Will Smith song.
So the killer turns out to be Timothy Olyphant from Deadwood, playing a character that's so ill-defined that you're like, oh, he's the killer guy. That's actually that's only trait.
Exactly.
But his motivation is so bat poop crazy. I love it because he's all about, I'm going to kill all these bunch of peoples, and then I'm going to blame horror movies during my trial, and the trial's going to be televised, and I'm going to become famous as a guy who got his defense from the Christian Coalition for killing people. And what got to me is, like, I was listening to this the first time around, like, went in the theaters and going, like, you know, I actually do believe Concerned Mothers of America would back him up in that.
Probably.
Yeah. And it's a slap in the face of these organizations, but it's just so, it's an astute slap in the face. Like, it's not random bashing, it's like pinpointing what's wrong with this organization.
Exactly.
And he's great.
Don't blame the person for their action. Blame other stuff that you're against, you know. So they're against horror movies, so it's not his fault he killed, you know. It's not him doing it. It's the horror movies that made him do. Even though hundreds of other people watch horror movies and they didn't kill, it's just a matter of time before they all become cold-blooded killers.
And they go towards that a lot because, of course, he has a sponsor.
Billy's mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, she talked bad about my son and I got a little knife happy, you know. She took it really at heart.
And again, she's a mother who blames Sidney for the death of her son, even though he killed a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
And again, you can see the analogy, because if Sidney is meant to represent the horror movie, and she's the woman backing up this crazy guy who's killing people to get attention so that the horror movie can go down, and she's backing this guy up because her son did some crazy, stupid stuff, and she's blaming Sidney the horror movie for it, she's clearly meant to be Concerned Mothers of America, essentially.
Yeah. Is that why she plays it also so crazy over the top?
I think it is. Like, I think it really is a case of just, like, humiliating the prototypical Concerned Mother of America.
Yeah.
And it's savage. And if you're part of that group, I can understand how you would be offended. But I'm not, and I think it's pretty freaking funny.
Yeah, it is very funny. I really don't like the, you know, hostage taking at, you know, 4 feet from a guy that has a gun.
I thought for sure you were going to criticize the fact that Cotton Weary saves the day.
Yes, that's another thing I don't quite like. They make, for the second time in a row, they make the unlikable character save the day. In the first movie, they really portrayed Gale Weathers as this horrible B-word person. Very unlikable. You really don't care for the character at all. And she saves the day. And again, in this movie, Cotton Weary, they wanted to make him a suspect. So they make him like a little psychopathic, a little crazy. So you don't like the guy. And he saves the day. So you like him because he's funny. You don't like him as a human being. You don't like him.
The thing is I'm so enthused about any performance that Liev Schreiber gives that I tend to just like the character just because he's Liev Schreiber.
That's discrimination, man.
It's discrimination against non-Liev Schreiber people.
Exactly.
People afflicted with non-Schreiber-niness. On that note, if you have any questions, comments you want to share with us, write us at mail@idiomanic.com or post a comment at idiomanic.com. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. And we will see you next time.